They thought flying me home was about securing a free nanny for a lavish Aspen vacation I unwittingly funded. They assumed I was just their obedient, lonely daughter. But they forgot I am a forensic audit expert who hunts dirty money for a living. When my black card declined at their 5-star hotel check-in, it was not a system error. It was the opening shot that would dismantle the fake empire they had built on my sweat for 10 years. My name is Lavinia Greystone, and at 32 years old, I had everything a person is supposed to want and absolutely nothing that actually matters. I stood barefoot on the heated marble floors of my penthouse in Zurich, pressing my forehead against the cold, floor-to-ceiling glass. Below me, the city was a constellation of amber lights reflecting off the Limit River. The Swiss take Christmas seriously. The streets were adorned with tasteful, geometric light displays, and even from this height, I imagined I could smell the roasted chestnuts and mulled wine drifting up from the vine plots. It was a picture-perfect scene, the kind of European winter wonderland that people save for years to visit. I owned it. I paid the mortgage on this glass box with money I earned hunting down the most sophisticated financial criminals in the world. My title at Vanguard Trace Solutions is Senior Forensic Auditor. It sounds dry, perhaps even boring to the uninitiated, but to the corporate embezzlers, the money launderers, and the executives who think they can hide assets in shell companies in the Cayman Islands, I am a predator. I can track a single dollar through a dozen international banks. I can look at a spreadsheet of 10,000 rows and feel the discrepancy before I even see the numbers. My instincts are sharp, honed by a decade of seeing the absolute worst of human greed. Yet, as I stood there in the silence of my impeccably decorated apartment, sipping a glass of wine that cost more than my first car, I was utterly blind to the fraud happening in my own bloodline. The silence of the apartment was heavy. It was not peaceful. It was the oppressive, ringing silence of a life built on solitude. I had canceled plans with a colleague earlier that evening because the thought of forced cheerfulness made my stomach turn. Instead, I was spending the holidays preparing for a solo ski trip to St. Moritz, just me, the powder, and the expensive isolation of a 5-star resort. Then, the phone rang. It was 2 a.m. The shrill sound cut through the quiet like a physical blow. I flinched, spilling a drop of red wine on the pristine white rug. My heart hammered against my ribs. Calls at 2 a.m. are never good news. They are tragedies waiting to be announced. I scrambled for the phone on the kitchen island. The screen lit up with a photo I had taken 5 years ago. My mother, Sylvia, smiling in a garden that no longer existed. I slid the icon to answer, my hand trembling. Lavinia. The voice was breathless, high-pitched with panic. "Mom," I asked, my throat tight. "What is it? What happened?" The video feed stabilized. My mother was sitting in her living room back in Winnetka. The lighting was dim, casting long shadows across her face. Her eyes were red-rimmed, puffy from crying. She looked smaller than I remembered, frail in a way that immediately twisted a knife of guilt into my gut. "It is your father," she sobbed, pressing a tissue to her nose. "Oh, Lavinia. It is Robert." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. "Is he alive?" "He is at the hospital now. They say it was a heart attack. A mild one, they called it. But Lavinia, it was terrifying. He just collapsed in the kitchen. 1 minute he was reaching for the scotch, and the next, she broke down into a fresh wave of tears. I stood frozen in my Zurich tower. Thousands of miles of ocean and land separating us, the professional part of my brain, the part that works at Vanguard Trace Solutions, wanted to ask for details. Which hospital? What were the enzyme levels? What is the prognosis? But the daughter in me, the little girl who still desperately wanted to be Daddy's favorite, just felt a cold wash of terror. "I am so sorry." "Mom," I whispered, "is he okay? Can I talk to him?" "He is sedated," she said, blowing her nose loudly. "The doctors say he needs rest. But he was asking for you, Lavinia. Before the ambulance took him, He kept whispering your name. I felt a lump form in my throat, hard and painful. He asked for me, my father, who usually only called me to ask how to reset his email password or to complain about property taxes, had called for me on his deathbed. I need to come home, I said, the decision forming before I even processed the logistics. Yes, Sylvia wept, looking directly into the camera. We need you, honey. We need the family together. It has been so long since we were all under one roof. Do you remember? Vinny, do you remember that Christmas when you were 7? The one where Daddy dressed up as Santa and you wore that blue velvet dress? We were so happy then. We need that again, especially now. We do not know how much time we have left. The memory she evoked was a tactical strike. It was one of the few truly golden memories I held on to. A fragment of time before the resentment and the demands for money started. The blue velvet dress. I could almost feel the fabric under my fingertips. She knew exactly which button to push. But then, a darker memory surfaced. I remembered the last time I went home 3 years ago. It had ended with me writing a check for $15,000 to cover a roof repair that I later suspected never happened. I remembered the feeling of being an intruder in my childhood home. A walking wallet. Mom, I started, hesitation creeping into my voice. I have to check flights. It is the holidays. Everything will be booked solid. Do not do this. A sharp voice cut in. The camera moved, and my sister Bianca filled the frame. She was 34, 2 years older than me, but she still wore the petulant expression of a teenager who had been denied a credit card. She was holding one of her twin boys on her hip, while the other tugged at her pajama pants. Do not be selfish. Lavinia, Bianca snapped. Her hair was messy, and she looked exhausted. An aesthetic she curated carefully for her social media following. Dad is lying in a hospital bed, and you are worried about flight availability. You are sitting over there in your ivory tower, probably drinking wine. While we are falling apart, I am not being selfish. Bianca, I defended myself. Though the old familiar shame was already rising, I just need to arrange things. Look at them, Bianca said, thrusting the toddler toward the camera. The boy looked confused and sleepy, rubbing his eyes. They are scared. Lavinia, they saw Grandpa fall. They need their aunt. Dad needs you. Stop thinking about your precious career for 1 second and think about this family. The word selfish echoed in my head. It was the weapon they always used. If I didn't pay for dinner, I was selfish. If I didn't fund Bianca's third failed business venture, I was selfish. And now, if I hesitated to fly home for a heart attack, I was a monster. I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. The forensic auditor in me knew something was off. The timing, the dramatic framing, the immediate pivot to guilt. But fear is a powerful blinder. If my father really was dying, and I didn't go, I would never forgive myself. Okay, I said, opening my eyes. I am coming. I will book the next flight out. Thank God. My mother sobbed from the background. Just get here, Lavinia. Just come home. I hung up the phone and stared at the black screen for a long moment. My hand was shaking. The silence of the apartment rushed back in, but now it felt suffocating. I moved into autopilot. This was a crisis, and I was good at crises. I sat down at my glass desk and opened my laptop. I pulled up the Swiss Air website. As I expected, flights to Chicago O'Hare were nearly sold out. The economy seats were gone. The only things left were the exorbitant first-class and business-class tickets. I didn't hesitate. I booked a round-trip business-class ticket for $8,000. It was an obscene amount of money, but I told myself it was necessary. I needed to sleep on the plane. I needed to be fresh when I landed to help Mom with the hospital arrangements. Next, I canceled my reservation at the street, Maritz Resort. The cancellation fee was strict. I lost 50% of the deposit. Nearly $2,000 gone in a click. I didn't care. Money was just a tool, and right now, I was using it to buy my way back into my family's good graces. I began to pack. I pulled my vintage Louis Vuitton suitcase from the closet, the large one. I started throwing in sweaters, heavy wool coats, and sensible boots. Chicago winters were brutal, far less forgiving than the dry cold of the Swiss Alps. As I was folding a cashmere scarf, my phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at it. It was a notification from my bank app. Alert transaction pending. Starbucks, Winnetka, Illinois, amount $52.30. I frowned. $50 at a coffee shop. That was a lot of lattes, and it was 3 a.m. in Chicago. Was Starbucks even open? My thumb hovered over the notification. The Vanguard Trace Solutions. Part of my brain twitched. Investigate. It whispered. Check the timestamp. Verify the card activity. Why is someone using the emergency card at 3 a.m? But then, I looked at the open suitcase. I looked at the clock. I had to be at the airport in 3 hours. If I missed this flight, I might not get another one for days. It is probably a delayed transaction from yesterday. I told myself, or maybe Mom bought breakfast for the nurses at the hospital. Yes, that made sense. She was stressed, buying coffee for everyone in the waiting room. I swiped the notification away. I did not open the app. I did not check the location or the itemized receipt. I chose to trust. I chose to be the good daughter. I finished packing my clothes. But then I stopped. I looked at the pile of gifts I had bought for myself, a few luxury items I planned to unwrap alone in St. Moritz. A limited edition silk scarf, a set of diamond stud earrings. They weren't enough. If I was going home, I couldn't go empty-handed. I needed armor. In my family, love was a currency, and the exchange rate was high. I grabbed my coat and ran out the door. It was technically morning, and the high-end shops on the Bahnhofstrasse would be opening soon for the last-minute Christmas rush. I had enough time before the flight if I hurried. I spent the next hour in a blur of credit card swipes. I bought a Patek Philippe watch for my father, vintage. Understated. Something that screamed dignity. Maybe this will make his heart stronger. I thought irrationally. Maybe this will make him look at me with pride. Cost $12,000. For my mother. I bought a designer handbag, the kind made of soft, buttery leather that she would stroke like a pet. Maybe this will dry her tears. Cost $4,500. For Bianca, I bought a set of skincare products infused with gold leaf and a pair of designer sunglasses. Maybe this will make her stop calling me selfish. Cost $1,200. For the twins, I bought the most expensive electronic tablets I could find and 2 massive Lego sets. By the time I returned to the penthouse to grab my suitcase, I had spent nearly $20,000 in under 60 minutes. I felt a sick sort of satisfaction. I was bringing tribute to the kings and queens of my life. Surely, they would have to welcome me now. I took a taxi to the airport. The driver was chatty, talking about his holiday plans with his grandchildren. But I stared out the window at the gray sky, at the check-in counter. The agent smiled at me. Heading home for the holidays, Ms. Greystone. Yes, I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Family emergency. I hope everything is all right, she said, handing me my boarding pass. I hope so too, I murmured. I walked through security, the heavy bag of gifts digging into my shoulder. I sat in the business class lounge, staring at the runway. I felt fragile. My armor of forensic expertise, of sharp suits and cold logic, had been stripped away. I was just Lavinia again, the girl who wasn't quite pretty enough, wasn't quite charming enough, who had to work twice as hard to get half the attention Bianca got for simply existing. I boarded the plane and took my seat. As the engines roared to life and the aircraft began to taxi, I looked down at Zurich disappearing beneath the clouds. I was leaving the safety of the life I had built. I was flying into the eye of the storm. I clutched my phone, thinking of my father in a hospital bed. I didn't know then that the mild heart attack was as real as the tooth fairy. I didn't know that the $52 coffee charge was just the tip of an iceberg that would sink my entire understanding of reality. I closed my eyes and leaned back, letting the G-force push me into the seat. I was flying home to save my family. I had no idea I was the one who was going to need saving. The wheels of the Boeing touched down on the tarmac at O'Hare International Airport with a violent jolt, sending a shudder through the cabin that matched the trembling in my own hands. Outside the window, Chicago was a gray, churning abyss. A blizzard was hammering the Midwest, burying the runway in sheets of horizontal white powder. The pilot had announced a crosswind landing, and for a moment, as the plane had swayed sickeningly to the left, I thought about the irony of dying in a plane crash while rushing home to a father who might already be gone. But we landed. The thrust reversers roared, and the plane slowed to a crawl. I turned on my phone the second the seatbelt sign flickered off. I expected a flood of texts. Maybe an update from my mother about Dad's condition. Maybe a message from Bianca asking which terminal I was at so she could pick me up. The screen lit up. Nothing. No missed calls. No messages. Just a notification from my weather app warning of severe wind chill. I stood in the aisle, wrestling my carry-on from the overhead bin while the other passengers pushed and shoved with holiday impatience. A knot of unease began to tighten in my chest. I had emailed my itinerary to everyone. I had sent a screenshot of the flight number to the family group chat. They knew exactly when I was landing. Navigating the airport with 3 large suitcases full of gifts and winter clothes was a physical battle. By the time I reached the arrivals curb, I was sweating under my wool coat, my hair frizzy from the static. I scanned the line of cars idling in the slush. I looked for my father's Range Rover, the one I paid the lease on. I looked for Bianca's white SUV. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The wind whipped around the concrete pillars, stinging my cheeks. I finally pulled out my phone and dialed my mother. It went straight to voicemail. I called Bianca. Ring, 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 voicemail. A cold realization settled over me, colder than the wind biting through my scarf. They were not coming. I was the emergency response team, the savior flying in from Europe with a checkbook and a bleeding heart, and they could not be bothered to drive 40 minutes to pick me up in a snowstorm. I hailed a taxi. The driver, a gruff man with a thick mustache, looked at my designer luggage and then at me. "Where to?" he grunted. "Winnetka," I said, giving him the address. The ride cost $120. I stared out the window as the city skyline faded into the sprawling, manicured affluence of the North Shore suburbs. The houses grew larger, the driveways longer, the gates more imposing. This was the world I had grown up in, a world of silent expectations and loud judgments. We pulled up to the house. It was a massive, colonial-style structure with white pillars and a brick driveway that could fit 6 cars. It looked impressive. To a stranger, it looked like the home of a successful banker or a CEO. But I looked at it with the eyes of a forensic auditor. I saw the deferred maintenance. I saw the gutters that hadn't been cleaned, overflowing with frozen debris. I saw the landscaping that was just a little too overgrown, the paint on the window frames that was starting to peel. It was a house that was trying too hard to pretend it wasn't drowning in debt. I dragged my luggage up the front steps, my boots crunching on the unsalted ice. I didn't ring the doorbell. I still had my key. I unlocked the heavy oak door and pushed it open. Warmth rushed out to meet me, carrying the scent of roasted garlic, rosemary, and expensive candles. I stepped into the foyer, kicking off my snowy boots. From the dining room, I heard laughter, loud, boisterous laughter, the clinking of silverware on china. I walked down the hallway, dragging my suitcases. The wheels rumbled on the hardwood floor, but no one seemed to hear. I stopped at the archway of the dining room. They were all there. My mother, Sylvia, was at the head of the table, looking radiant in a red silk blouse, her hair perfectly coiffed. Bianca was on her right, scrolling on her phone while spooning mashed potatoes into her mouth. Bianca's husband, a man whose primary talent was losing money on sports bets, was laughing at something on the television mounted on the wall. The twins were running circles around the table, shrieking, and there, at the other end of the table, sat my father, Robert, the man who had supposedly suffered a heart attack less than 24 hours ago. He was not in a hospital gown, he was not pale, he was wearing a crisp button-down shirt. His face flushed with a ruddy, healthy glow, and in his hand, he held a tumbler of amber liquid whiskey. Neat. I dropped the handle of my suitcase. The loud thud echoed through the room. The laughter stopped. 5 pairs of eyes turned to look at me. For a second, nobody moved. Then, my mother set down her fork. She didn't rush to me. She didn't cry out in relief. She glanced at the antique grandfather clock in the corner. "Lavinia," she said, her tone carrying a note of mild irritation. "You are late. We expected you 2 hours ago. The roast is getting cold." I stood there, frozen, my brain trying to reconcile the image of the dying man from the FaceTime call with the man currently chewing a piece of steak in front of me. "Mom," I stammered. "Dad, I thought the hospital." My father waved his hand dismissively, the ice in his glass clinking. "The doctors released me this morning. Vinny, false alarm, mostly, just stress and high blood pressure. They told me to go home and relax." "Relax," I repeated, my voice rising an octave. "You were in the cardiac unit. Mom said you collapsed." "I flew 4,000 miles and we appreciate it." "Darling, really," my mother said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. She walked over and gave me a stiff, one-armed hug, careful not to wrinkle her clothes. "But there is no need to be dramatic. We are just glad you are here. Did you bring the gifts the twins have been asking about them all night?" I looked at her, stunned. "How was your flight? Are you hungry?" "Just, where are the gifts?" Bianca looked up from her phone. Her eyes didn't meet mine. They went straight to the Louis Vuitton suitcase standing behind me. "I hope you didn't bring chocolate," Bianca said. "I am on a keto cycle. But if you brought those bags from the Zurich boutique I sent you the link for, I might forgive you for being late." I looked back at my father. He took a long sip of his drink. "Dad, should you be drinking scotch if you just had a heart scare?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mix of exhaustion and rising anger. "It is medicinal," he chuckled, winking at Bianca's husband. "Thins the blood, better than aspirin. Come on, sit down. Don't just stand there like a statue." I sat. I didn't take off my coat. I felt like a stranger who had walked into the wrong house. A plate was placed in front of me, leftovers. Lukewarm. The dinner conversation resumed as if I hadn't just arrived from another continent. They talked about the neighbors. They talked about a new country club membership fee. They talked about Bianca's Instagram engagement numbers. "So, Lavinia," Bianca said, chewing a piece of bread. "Where are you staying?" I paused, my fork halfway to my mouth. "What do you mean I am staying in my room?" Bianca exchanged a look with my mother, a look I knew well. It was the look of conspirators who had already made a decision and were just waiting to inform the victim. "Actually, honey," my mother said, pouring herself more wine, "we made some changes while you were away. Bianca needed a space for her work. You know, her influencer career is really taking off. She needs a studio with good lighting." I put down my fork. "You turned my bedroom into a studio. It has the best natural light," Bianca defended, her voice shrill. "And I have over 10,000 followers now. I can't film in the living room with the kids running around." "So where am I sleeping?" I asked, looking around the table. "We fixed up the guest room downstairs," my father said, slicing his steak. "It is very private." Downstairs meant the basement. After dinner, I dragged my luggage down the narrow, carpeted stairs to the basement. The air grew colder with every step. The guest room was a finished section of the basement. Yes, but it smelled of damp earth and old cardboard. There was a single small window near the ceiling that looked out at ground level, basically a view of the snow and car tires. The bed was an old pull-out sofa that sagged in the middle. The sheets felt cold and slightly gritty. This was my welcome home. The successful daughter, the forensic auditor, the one who paid the mortgage on the upper floors, was sleeping next to the furnace. I went back upstairs to distribute the gifts. I needed to buy my way into their hearts, just like I had planned in Zurich. I handed the Patek Philippe watch to my father. He opened the velvet box. His eyes widened. He whistled low. "Now this," he said, holding it up to the light, "is class. Frank down the street just got a Rolex. But this is real money. He didn't say thank you." He slipped it onto his wrist and immediately turned to show Bianca's husband. "Look at that dial. I bet this costs more than your car." "Son, I gave my mother the designer handbag." She gasped, running her hands over the leather. Oh, Lavinia, this is the color of the season. The ladies at the bridge club are going to die. Just die. She stood up and walked to the mirror to pose with it. She didn't hug me. She hugged the bag. I gave Bianca the sunglasses and the gold leaf skincare. She inspected the packaging, checking the labels. Nice, she muttered. I saw an unboxing of this on TikTok. It is supposed to be okay. Thanks. The twins tore open their tablets and Lego sets, screaming for 5 minutes before running off to a corner to ignore everyone else. I stood in the middle of the living room, surrounded by wrapping paper. I had spent nearly $20,000. I had expected a moment of connection, a shared look of gratitude. Instead, I felt like a delivery driver who had just dropped off a package. They were already moving on, discussing where they would wear the items, who they would show them to. I was exhausted. My eyes were burning. I am going to bed. I announced. Good night, honey, my mother said absently, admiring her reflection in the hallway mirror with the new bag on her arm. Sleep tight. We have a big day tomorrow. I walked back down to the basement. I didn't undress. I just took off my coat and sat on the edge of the sagging sofa bed. The furnace kicked on with a loud roar, rattling the pipes overhead. I couldn't sleep. My body was on Swiss time, 7 hours ahead, but my mind was racing with something else. The discrepancies were piling up. The lack of medical equipment for a heart patient, the expensive wine on the table when they had claimed to be struggling with bills last month, the fact that my room was gone, around 3 a.m. I realized I had left my water bottle in the kitchen. My throat was parched. I crept up the stairs, trying to be silent. The house was dark, but a faint light spilled from the crack under the library door, my father's study. I heard voices, low, hushed whispers. Are you sure she suspects nothing? It was my father's voice. He sounded sober now, sharp. She is clueless. Robert, my mother replied. Her voice was a hiss. Did you see her face when you took the watch? She is so desperate to please us. She won't ask questions, but the timing. My father said, if she checks the accounts, she won't check. Bianca's voice chimed in. She is too busy playing the martyr. Besides, tomorrow when we leave, she will be too overwhelmed with the kids to look at anything. We just have to get on that plane. My mother said, once we are in Aspen, she can't do anything. We deserve this. Robert, after putting up with her superiority complex for years, we deserve a little luxury. I stood frozen on the landing, my hand hovering over the banister. Aspen. My breath caught in my throat. They weren't talking about a medical procedure. They were talking about a trip. I slowly backed away, stepping down one stair at a time, terrified that a floorboard would creak. My heart was pounding harder than it had during the turbulence on the plane. I retreated into the cold basement and locked the door. I sat in the dark, staring at the small, high window where the snow was piling up against the glass. They were planning to leave. They were planning to go to Aspen, and they were terrified I would check the accounts. A cold, hard clarity washed over me, replacing the jet lag and the emotional hurt. This was a feeling I knew. It was the feeling I got when I found a duplicate invoice in a company ledger. It was the feeling of a loose thread that, when pulled, would unravel the entire sweater. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. I didn't turn it on yet. I just set it on the wobbly nightstand next to me. They thought Lavinia Greystone, the daughter, was sleeping downstairs. They were right. But Lavinia Greystone, the senior forensic auditor, was wide awake, and she was about to start an audit. I woke up to the smell of maple syrup and expensive bacon grease wafting down the basement stairs. The air in the makeshift guest room was stale, recycled through the furnace all night, and my back ached from the crater in the middle of the sofa bed. For a moment, staring at the exposed insulation in the ceiling, I forgot where I was. Then the memory of the hushed conversation I had overheard the night before crashed back into my mind. Aspen. They are going to Aspen. I showered in the tiny basement bathroom, which had a shower head that sprayed water with the pressure of a weeping willow, and dressed in a cream-colored silk blouse and tailored wool trousers. I needed to feel like myself. I needed to feel like the woman who commanded boardrooms in Zurich, not the unwanted daughter sleeping next to the boiler. When I walked into the kitchen, the scene was aggressively domestic. The morning sun streamed through the bay windows, illuminating a breakfast spread that could have fed a small army. There were stacks of Belgian waffles, a platter of smoked salmon, fresh berries, and a pitcher of what looked like freshly squeezed orange juice. "Good morning." "Sleepyhead," my mother chirped. She was wearing a cashmere robe that I recognized. I had bought it for her 2 Christmases ago. It cost $600. "Coffee?" my father asked, gesturing to the French press. He looked remarkably spry for a man who had allegedly been at death's door yesterday. His complexion was clear, his hands steady as he poured the dark liquid. I sat down, accepting the coffee. The atmosphere was brittle. It felt like the air before a thunderstorm, charged with static and unspoken intent. Bianca was already eating, tapping away on her phone with one hand while feeding a piece of sausage to the family dog with the other. "So," I started, testing the waters. "How are you feeling today?" "Dad." "No chest pains." Robert waved a dismissive hand, his mouth full of waffle. "Fit as a fiddle. Vinny, just needed a good night's sleep and the comfort of family. That is the best medicine." I took a sip of coffee. It was good. Too good. It was Blue Mountain coffee. $60 a pound. "That is great news," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "So, what is the plan for the holidays?" "I was thinking we could drive into the city. Maybe see the window displays at Marshall Fields like we used to." The table went silent. My mother exchanged a quick, nervous glance with Bianca. Bianca stopped tapping on her phone and looked at me with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, Lavinia," my mother began. Reaching under the table, she pulled out a glossy, heavy-stock brochure and slid it across the marble countertop toward me. "We have something a little more special in mind. We thought, since we have all had such a stressful year, especially with your father's health scare, we deserve a real treat, a healing retreat." I looked down at the brochure. The cover featured a snow-capped mountain peak and a lodge that looked more like a palace. The sanctuary at Aspen Peaks, 5 stars, exclusive, private. "Aspen?" I asked, looking up. "Yes." Sylvia clapped her hands together. "We leave today at noon." Isn't it exciting? Fresh mountain air, spa treatments, Michelin star dining. It is exactly what Robert needs to recover. I felt a flicker of confusion. I had assumed, based on the conversation I heard, that they were going, but the way she said "we" made me pause. Had I misjudged them? Had they actually planned a family trip including me? "Wow," I said, genuinely surprised. I just got here, and I unpacked. But I suppose I can repack. I have my ski gear in storage in Zurich. But I can rent equipment there. Bianca let out a short, sharp laugh. It sounded like a bark. "Rent equipment," Bianca mocked. "Oh, Vinny, you are not coming skiing." I froze. The coffee cup stopped halfway to my mouth. "Excuse me?" My mother reached out and patted my hand, her touch patronizingly soft. "Oh, honey, don't look so crestfallen. We tried to get you a ticket. We really did. But it is peak season. The resort is fully booked. Literally not a single broom closet available. And the flights? Forget about it. We booked this months ago." "Months ago," I repeated. "But you called me yesterday saying Dad was dying." "Well, we didn't know if we could go," my father interjected smoothly. "But now that I'm feeling better, we can't let the reservation go to waste. It is non-refundable." "Okay," I said slowly, trying to process the logic. "So you are going to Aspen for 10 days, and I am doing what? Staying here alone?" My mother smiled. A tight grimace of a smile. "Alone? Of course not. You won't be alone. You will have the most important job of all." She gestured to the living room, where the twins, Leo and Lucas, were currently throwing foam darts at the antique vase in the hallway. "You get to bond with your nephews," Sylvia announced, as if she were bestowing a knighthood upon me. I stared at her. "You want me to babysit, not babysit," Bianca corrected, rolling her eyes. "Bond? Look, our nanny, Mrs. Higgins. She quit 3 days ago. Just walked out." Can you believe the entitlement? She said the boys were unmanageable, totally unprofessional. We have been scrambling. And then we thought, wait, Lavinia is coming home. It is perfect. Perfect, I choked out. I flew 4,000 miles to see my dying father, and now you are leaving me to watch 2 5-year-olds while you go to a 5-star resort, Lavinia. Lower your voice, my father snapped. You are upsetting your mother. This is insane, I said. Pushing my chair back, I am not a nanny. I have a job. I have a life. I came here to be with my family, not to run a daycare while you sip champagne in Colorado. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Bianca said, finally putting her phone down. What else do you have to do? You are single. You have no kids. You live in that cold apartment all by yourself. You don't know the first thing about sacrifice or family duty. Consider this a crash course. Practice for if you ever actually manage to find a husband. The insult landed with a dull thud. It was the same old song, Lavinia the spinster, Lavinia the workaholic. I looked down at the brochure again. My eyes caught a piece of paper tucked inside it. It was the itinerary confirmation. I pulled it out. My mother tried to snatch it away, but I was faster. Guess names. Robert Greystone, Sylvia Greystone, Bianca Miller, Jason Miller. Total cost, $45,320. Payment method. Visa. Ending in 8899. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My ears started ringing. 8899. That was not my father's card. That was not a joint account. That was the emergency supplementary card I had issued to my father 5 years ago. I had told him, use this only for life or death emergencies. If you need surgery, if the house burns down. I looked up, shaking the paper in my hand. You paid for this with my card. My father didn't even flinch. He took another bite of his waffle. We were having cash flow issues this month. Lavinia, the market is volatile. I intended to pay you back, eventually. $45,000, I whispered, the number feeling heavy on my tongue. You spent $45,000 of my money on a vacation, lied to me about a heart attack to get me here, and now you are forcing me to be your unpaid servant. Now you are just being petty, my mother said, her voice trembling with fake emotion. We raised you. We sacrificed everything for you to go to those fancy schools in Europe, and now you begrudge us a little happiness. You earn more in a month than we see in a year. It is selfish. Lavinia, truly selfish, Bianca chimed in, leaning forward, her eyes narrowing. You know, for someone who claims to be so smart. You are really emotionally stunted. Dad could have died yesterday. The stress of you arguing about money is going to trigger him again. Do you want that? Do you want to kill him over a credit card bill? The gaslighting was masterful. It was a symphony of manipulation conducted by experts. They had trapped me. If I left, I was the villain who abandoned her nephews. If I canceled the card now, the resort would kick them out, and I would be the villain who ruined Christmas. Just then, a high-pitched scream pierced the air. Leo, one of the twins, came sprinting into the kitchen. His hands were covered in sticky, purple grape jelly. He didn't stop. He ran straight at me, slamming his small, sticky hands onto my thighs. Up, up, and up, he screamed. He grabbed the fabric of my cream silk trousers, Italian silk, dry clean only, $400, and smeared the purple jelly deep into the weave. Leo. No, I gasped, trying to pry his hands off. Bianca didn't move. She didn't scold him. She just laughed. See? He loves you already. He wants his auntie. Don't be mean to him. Lavinia. He is sensitive. Lucas, the other twin, ran in a moment later, holding a permanent marker. He looked at the white cabinets, then at my legs, calculating his next canvas. I looked at the stains spreading on my trousers. I looked at my father, who was calmly drinking the coffee I had paid for. I looked at my mother, who was checking her reflection in a spoon, worrying about her lipstick for the flight. I looked at Bianca, who was looking at me with pure, unadulterated entitlement. They didn't see me. They didn't see a person. They saw an ATM that could change diapers. I felt a physical sensation in my chest, like a bolt clicking into place. It was the same feeling I got when I found the smoking gun in a forensic audit the shell company, the fake invoice, the hidden offshore account. The confusion vanished, the hurt vanished, the emotion drained out of me, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. I realized then that if I fought them, if I screamed and canceled the cards right now, they would just stay here. They would be in my face, crying, screaming, guilt-tripping me for the next 10 days. I would never get to the bottom of the financial rot. I would never know the full extent of what they had done. I needed them gone. I needed the house empty. I needed access to the filing cabinets in my father's study. I needed to see the physical mail. I needed silence to work. $45,000 was a steep price to pay for an investigation fee. But in my line of work, I had seen companies pay millions to uncover fraud. This was an investment. I took a deep breath. I unpeeled Leo's sticky fingers from my leg. I stood up, smoothing the ruined silk. I looked at my father. I looked at my mother. And for the first time in years, I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a shark swimming through deep water. "You are right," I said, my voice steady and calm. The table went quiet. They blinked, surprised by my sudden capitulation. "I am my father?" asked, lowering his fork. "Yes," I said. "You are right. You raised me. I have been absent. I have been focused on my career. And I have neglected my duties as a daughter and an aunt. You deserve this trip. You really do." My mother let out a long breath, clutching her chest. "Oh, Lavinia. Thank goodness. I knew you would understand." "And the boys?" I continued, looking at the twins who were now trying to climb the refrigerator. "I would love to watch them. It will be educational. I need to learn how to handle family life. Right? Bianca is right. I need the practice." Bianca looked suspicious for a split second, her eyes narrowing as she studied my face, but my surrender was too convenient, too beneficial for her to question. She wanted to go to Aspen. She wanted the spa treatments. So she chose to believe the lie. "Exactly," Bianca said, relaxing. "You will thank me later. They are angels once you get to know them. Just don't give them sugar after 6 in the evening. I will follow your instructions to the letter." I said, "Now, you should probably hurry. Your flight is at noon, and with the snow, traffic to O'Hare will be terrible. You don't want to miss your check-in." The panic of scheduling took over. My mother jumped up. "Oh my God. The bags, Robert. Finish your coffee. We have to go." The kitchen descended into chaos. They rushed around, grabbing suitcases, shouting orders. "Make sure the boys brush their teeth," my mother yelled over her shoulder. "Don't let them watch more than 2 hours of iPad," Bianca shouted. "Check the mail," my father added. I stood in the center of the hurricane, perfectly still. I watched them scramble. I watched them load their luggage into the taxi that arrived 20 minutes later. I watched them bundle into the car, their faces flushed with the excitement of a vacation stolen from my pocket. My mother rolled down the window as the taxi pulled away. "Love you. Vinny holding down the fort is a big job. We will call you when we land." I waved. I kept waving until the taxi turned the corner and disappeared behind the snow-covered hedges. The silence that followed was absolute. I turned back to the house. The front door was wide open, letting in the freezing wind. The twins were standing in the hallway, looking at me. Leo still had grape jelly on his hands. Lucas was holding the marker cap in his mouth. "Who are you?" Lucas asked. "I am your Aunt Lavinia," I said, closing the door and locking it. The deadbolt slid home with a heavy, satisfying thunk. I looked at the messy kitchen, the ruined breakfast, the sticky fingerprints on the pristine white counters. "And we are going to make some changes around here," I whispered to myself. I picked up my phone. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call the bank. Not yet. I dialed a number I had saved years ago for a colleague in Chicago who needed high-end domestic help. Greystone residence. I said when the line connected, "I need an emergency nanny service. 2 children. High needs. 24/7 coverage. Yes, I will pay the premium rate. Send 3 people. and I need a locksmith. I looked at the closed door of my father's study. The audit begins now. The moment the taillights of the taxi disappeared around the bend of the snowy driveway, the mask dropped. The submissive, guilt-ridden daughter who had stood in the doorway waving goodbye vanished. In her place stood the senior forensic auditor of Vanguard Trace Solutions. My posture straightened, the slump in my shoulders, heavy with the weight of familial obligation, evaporated. I turned on my heel and walked back into the foyer, closing the door against the biting wind. The click of the deadbolt was not just a sound of security. It was the sound of a courtroom gavel signaling the beginning of a trial. The twins, Leo and Lucas, were standing by the stairs, looking up at me with confused, sticky faces. They sensed the shift in the atmosphere. Children are intuitive like that. They know when the predator in the room has changed. I did not crouch down to their level. I did not offer them cookies. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed the number for Elite Nannies of Chicago, a service I knew catered to the Gold Coast billionaires who needed discretion and iron-fisted capability. I need an emergency placement, I said the moment the operator answered. 2 high-energy boys, aged 5. I need a team of 2 certified caregivers, 1 for entertainment, 1 for educational discipline, 24/7 coverage starting immediately. Price is not an issue. I will pay triple the holiday rate for speed. Be here in 45 minutes. I hung up before she could finish her sales pitch. While I waited for the cavalry to arrive, I set the boys up in the living room with the television turned to a harmless cartoon channel and a bowl of pretzels. Then, I walked past them, ignoring their requests for juice, and headed straight for my father's study. The room smelled of stale cigar smoke and lemon polish. A scent that used to intimidate me. Now, it just smelled like negligence. I walked behind the heavy mahogany desk, a desk that cost more than my first apartment, and sat in his leather chair. It squeaked in protest. I opened my briefcase, the sleek, metallic case that I never traveled without, and retrieved my work laptop. This was not a consumer-grade machine. It was an encrypted fortress loaded with proprietary software designed to slice through corporate firewalls and decrypt hidden ledgers. I plugged it in, connected to the house Wi-Fi, and established a secure VPN tunnel back to my private server in Zurich. The audit had officially begun. Step 1 was data acquisition. I didn't need their passwords. My father used the same variation of his birthday and the dog's name for everything since 1998. I logged into the main family joint account first. Then, I accessed the credit card portals. Finally, I used my own credentials to access the shared trust structures I had set up for them. I didn't just look at the last month. A forensic audit requires context. I set the parameters to download every single transaction, wire transfer, and withdrawal for the last 5 years. The progress bar on my screen moved steadily from 0 to 100%, while the data downloaded. I turned my attention to the physical space. In my line of work, we have a saying, the digital world tells you what happened, but the physical world tells you why. I checked the desk drawers, locked, of course. I reached into my hair and pulled out a bobby pin. It was a cliché, but a functional one for a simple wafer tumbler lock like this. Within 10 seconds, the top drawer slid open with a soft rattle. Inside, it was a chaos of paper, unopened envelopes, crumpled receipts, and legal notices were jammed together without order. I began to sort them, my hands moving with the practiced speed of a blackjack dealer. Utilities, overdue, country club membership, paid, credit card solicitation, opened. Then I found a thick envelope at the bottom, buried under a stack of Golf Digest magazines. It was from a mortgage lending firm called North Shore Capital. I frowned. The mortgage on this house should have been nearly paid off. My grandfather had put down a massive deposit in the 80s, and I had sent a lump sum 5 years ago to clear the principal. I opened the envelope. My breath hitched in my throat. It was a document for a second mortgage. A home equity line of credit taken out 18 months ago for the amount of $400,000. I scanned the document, my eyes racing to the bottom of the page. There, on the line marked Guarantor, was a signature. Lavinia Greystone. I stared at the ink. It was a good forgery. It had the loop on the L that I used, and the sharp strike on the T. But 18 months ago, I was in Singapore leading an investigation into a shipping conglomerate. I was physically on the other side of the planet. My mother, it had to be. She was the artist of the family, the one who used to forge my excuse notes for school. She had signed my name, leveraging my credit score and my assets to secure a loan against a house I thought was safe. Where did $400,000 go? I turned back to the screen. The bank statements were ready. I opened the file and began to filter the data. I searched for large transfers matching the dates of the mortgage payout. There it was. A transfer of $200,000 to an account labeled JM Ventures, LLC, JM, Jason Miller, Bianca's husband. I opened a new window and ran a background check on JM Ventures. It was a shell, no website, no employees. The registered address was a P.O. box in a strip mall. I tracked the money leaving JM Ventures. It didn't go to office space or product development. It went to Midwest Motors for the purchase of a Porsche Cayenne Turbo $90,000. The rest was funneled in small, jagged increments to BetKings Online and Vegas Vault, 2 offshore gambling sites. I sat back, the leather chair groaning. The startup investment I had sent 2 years ago, another $50,000 that I thought was helping my brother-in-law build a logistics app, had gone into the same black hole. Jason wasn't an entrepreneur. He was an unemployed gambling addict driving a luxury car paid for by fraud. But the horror didn't stop there. I turned my attention to the Greystone Retirement Trust. I had established this fund 3 years ago with a strict mandate the capital was to be preserved, and the interest was to be used strictly for medical expenses and emergency home repairs. I had put $300,000 of my bonuses into it. I pulled up the transaction history. The balance was currently $12.45. The list of outflows was a testament to their delusion. January 12th. $4,000 to Sacred Heart. Private Academy. That was tuition for the twins. I was paying for their private education while Bianca posted on Facebook about being a boss mom who provided the best for her kids. February 4th. $2,500 to the Golden Lotus Spa. My mother's weekly treatments. March 10th. $5,000 to Winnetka National Golf Club. My father's annual dues. They had drained it. They had treated a medical safety net like a personal piggy bank. Every time I sent money home, thinking I was being a good daughter, I was just refilling the trough. I felt a cold rage settling in my stomach. Distinct from the hot anger of betrayal, this was the cold, calculating fury of a professional who sees a messy ledger and feels the compulsive need to balance it. I needed more. I needed the smoking gun that proved intent. Financial crimes are often dismissed as incompetence unless you can prove malice. I picked up Bianca's old iPad, which she had carelessly left on the bookshelf probably because she had upgraded to the newest model with my money. It was password protected, but Bianca was lazy. The passcode was the twins' birthday. I bypassed the lock and went straight to her email. She had deleted her sent folder, thinking that made the emails disappear. It was adorable how little people understood about cloud storage. I connected the iPad to my laptop and ran a recovery script. It took 3 minutes to restore 6 months of deleted correspondence. I sorted by recipient, looking for emails between Bianca and her best friend, Chloe. I found an email chain titled Aspen Planning, from Bianca to Chloe. Date December 20th. Ugh, I know the trip is expensive, but don't worry, the ATM is coming home for Christmas. We just have to guilt trip her about Dad's health, and she will open the wallet. She is so desperate for Mom's approval it is pathetic. I will get her to watch The Brat so we can actually ski. She has no life anyway, just works and hoards money. She owes us. I read the words twice. The ATM. Pathetic. She owes us. I didn't cry. The time for tears had passed on the flight over. I took a screenshot of the email. Then I took a photo of the forged mortgage document. I exported the bank statements highlighting the gambling debts and the embezzlement of the trust fund. I opened Excel. I started a new spreadsheet and named it the Greystone Matrix. Column A date. Column B. Source of funds. My salary, my trust, my credit. Column C. Stated purpose medical, house repair, investment. Column D. Actual purpose gambling, luxury goods, vacation. Column E. Statute violated fraud, forgery, embezzlement. I typed furiously for hours. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, but I didn't stop to turn on a light. The glow of the monitors illuminated my face. I categorized every lie. I cross-referenced every dollar. By 6 p.m, the doorbell rang. The nanny service had arrived. 2 women in crisp gray uniforms stood on the porch, looking capable and serious. I let them in. "The boys are in the living room," I said, handing them a credit card. "Order whatever food they want. Put them to bed at 8. Do not disturb me unless the house is on fire." I returned to the study and hit print. The laser printer in the corner whirred to life, spitting out page after page of incriminating evidence. It was a thick stack, warm to the touch. It weighed perhaps 2 pounds, but in legal terms, it weighed a lifetime. I picked up the stack and aligned the edges on the desk. It was beautiful. It was the most comprehensive audit I had ever conducted, and I had done it in 6 hours. I picked up my phone and dialed a number with a New York area code. It was late on the East Coast, but the man I was calling didn't sleep. Elias Thorne, attorney at law. He was the shark Vanguard Trace Solutions used when we needed to crush someone legally. "Hello?" His voice was gravelly, surprised to hear from me on a holiday. "Lavinia." "Is everything all right?" "No." "Elias," I said, my voice calm and deadly. "Everything is wrong, but I'm about to make it right. I need to file a lawsuit." "Against whom?" "A corporation gnome," I said, looking at the family portrait on the desk, my parents and Bianca smiling. While I was absent from the frame, against Robert Greystone, Sylvia Greystone, and Bianca Miller. There was a pause on the line. "Your family." I ran my thumb over the forged signature on the mortgage document. "They are not my family. Elias, they are defendants. I have the evidence. I have the paper trail. I am sending you a file securely now. I want you to prepare a freezing order for all assets. And I want you to draft an eviction notice." "Eviction?" Elias asked. "Yes," I said. "They are currently vacationing on stolen money. When they come back, I want them to find out they don't have a home to return to." I hit send on the email. The file whooshed away into the digital ether. The trap was set. The investigation was closed. Now, the execution phase began. 2 days passed in a strange, suspended silence. The house in Winnetka was quiet, save for the muffled sounds of the professional nannies managing the twins in the West Wing. I had isolated myself in the study, sleeping on a leather couch, surrounded by stacks of financial records that grew taller by the hour. The only noise came from my phone, buzzing incessantly with notifications from Instagram. I watched, like a spectator at a gladiator match, as my family broadcast their stolen joy to the world. There was a photo of Bianca posing in a white fur coat, likely rented or bought with my credit card, holding a glass of champagne against a backdrop of pristine snow. The caption read, "Living my best life. Blessed boss babe family first." There was a video of my father, the man who was supposedly recovering from a heart attack, laughing heartily as he tried to ski, his cheeks flushed with expensive cognac, not exertion, and my mother, posting a selfie from the spa, cucumber slices on her eyes, with the text, "Finally some peace, family is everything, but self-care is divine." Not a single mention of me, not a missing Lavinia, not a "wish auntie was here." I was the invisible engine fueling their paradise, unseen and unacknowledged. My phone pinged with a direct text from my mother. "Are the boys behaving? Make sure you order them pizza tonight from that place on Main Street. Do not try to cook. Lavinia, we remember the lasagna incident of 2005. We want them fed, not poisoned. Love, Mom." I stared at the screen. The lasagna incident. I was 12 years old, trying to make dinner for them because my mother had a migraine. I had burned the edges slightly. They had laughed about it for years, turning my attempt at care into a running joke about my incompetence. I didn't reply. I simply deleted the message. I put on my coat, a sharp, charcoal wool trench that made me feel armored, and drove to the local branch of the First National Bank of Winnetka. This was where my father held his primary accounts, the ones my name was now attached to thanks to their forgery. The branch manager, a man named Mr. Henderson, who had known my father for 20 years, smiled when I walked in. "Lavinia." He beamed. "Long time no see. Your father told me you were in town. Said you were taking a break from your, what was it? Data entry job?" I stopped. "Data entry? Is that what he told you?" I asked, my voice dangerously soft. "Well, yes," Henderson chuckled, oblivious to the frost forming in the air. "Said you were working some administrative role in Europe? Good for you. Dear, honest work, unlike your sister." "Eh?" "That girl is a dynamo. Your dad says her business is paying for their whole trip to Aspen." The air left my lungs. It wasn't just the theft, it was the erasure. They hadn't just stolen my money, they had stolen my identity. To the world. I was the failure. The clerk, the footnote, Bianca, the unemployed leech, was the success story. I walked to his desk and sat down. I didn't smile. "Mr. Henderson," I said, sliding my passport and the forged mortgage document across the mahogany surface. "We need to talk about risk management. Specifically, the risk of you losing your license for facilitating fraud." 10 minutes later, I walked out of the bank. Behind me, Mr. Henderson was frantically typing on his computer, his face pale. I had exercised my rights as a co-signer, a status they had forced upon me to freeze everything. Every checking account, every savings account, every line of credit connected to the Greystone name was now locked down tight. Not a penny could move in or out without my biometric authorization. I drove back to the house, but before I could turn into the driveway, I saw a familiar figure waving from the sidewalk next door. Mrs. Gable, the neighbor who had lived there since I was 6. "Lavinia," she called out, shuffling through the snow in her slippers. I rolled down the window. "Hello, Mrs. Gable." "It is so good to see you," she said, leaning in. "I saw the lights on. Your parents said you were babysitting while they went on that big trip Bianca treated them to. Isn't that wonderful? Such a generous girl. Your sister." I gripped the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. "Bianca treated them." "Oh yes, Mrs." Gable nodded enthusiastically. "Sylvia was telling everyone at the book club. She said Bianca's internet company finally took off and she wanted to spoil them. She said it was a relief because they were worried about having to support you again." "Support me," I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "Well, you know," she murmured, looking embarrassed. "With the cost of living in Europe and your entry-level salary, they worry. Lavinia, parents always worry." I looked at this kind, elderly woman who had been fed a diet of lies for a decade. I didn't correct her. There was no point in winning a sidewalk argument. "Thank you for telling me." "Mrs. Gable," I said, "you have been very helpful." I drove up the driveway, the rage now a cold, solid thing in my chest. It was a diamond of hatred, hard and unbreakable. They had taken my money, yes, but they had also taken my pride. They had painted me as a charity case to the very people I had grown up with, all while living like kings on my dime. I walked into the house and went straight to the study. I opened my laptop. It was time to prepare the final blow. I drafted an email. The recipient list included every single contact in my father's address book, his golf buddies, the church committee, the extended family in Ohio, the neighbors. Subject: the truth about the Greystone family success. Attached was a PDF file. It contained the bank statements showing the drain on my trust fund. It contained the forged mortgage document. It contained the email from Bianca calling me an ATM. And it contained a side-by-side comparison of my actual salary as a senior forensic auditor versus the data entry wage they claimed I earned. I didn't send it, not yet. This was the nuclear option. I saved it as a draft, the sword of Damocles. I thought, ready to drop. Then, I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the sanctuary at Aspen Peaks. I navigated the automated menu until I reached the concierge desk. "Good afternoon. The sanctuary. How may I assist you?" A polished voice answered. "Hello," I said, putting on my most authoritative professional voice. "My name is Lavinia Greystone. I am the primary card holder for the reservation under Robert Greystone." "Ah, yes, Ms. Greystone. We have your family here. They are enjoying the Diamond Suite. Is there something I can do for you? Perhaps arrange a surprise bottle of wine?" "No." I said, "I need to speak with the general manager. Immediately. It concerns a billing irregularity involving a stolen credit card." The tone on the other end shifted instantly from polite to alarmed. "One moment, please." While I waited on hold, the door to the study opened. One of the professional nannies, a stern woman named Mrs. Clara, stepped in. "Ms. Greystone," she said, "I apologize for interrupting." "What is it?" I asked, covering the mouthpiece of the phone. "It is the boys," she said, her lips thinning. "They are refusing to eat the vegetables." Which is fine. Children are children, but Leo just threw his plate at my colleague and said, "Well," he said, "you are the help. You have to do what I say. My mom says ugly people are born to serve us." I closed my eyes. Ugly people are born to serve us. A 5-year-old didn't invent that sentence. That was a direct quote. That was Bianca speaking through the mouth of her son. I looked at Mrs. Clara. "I am sorry," I said sincerely. "That is unacceptable. It is concerning." She corrected. "We are professionals. Ms. Greystone. We handle difficult children. But this is learned behavior. They treat anyone who isn't giving them exactly what they want as subhuman. Just thought you should know. Thank you." "Clara," I said, "handle it however you see fit. No screens, no treats. If they throw food, they clean it up." "But your sister left instructions." "My sister isn't paying you." I cut in. They clean up the mess." Clara nodded, a flicker of respect in her eyes. "Understood." She left. Closing the door, the general manager came on the line. "Ms. Greystone, this is Marcus Vance. I understand there is an issue with the card, Mr. Vance," I said, leaning back in the leather chair. "There is a significant issue. The card on file ending in 8899 was used without my authorization. I have just reported it stolen to the bank." There was a silence on the line. "Stolen. But Mr. Greystone is your father?" "Yes," I said. "An identity theft is a crime. Regardless of DNA, the bank is reversing the charges as we speak. That means your $45,000 bill is currently unpaid." I could hear the frantic clicking of a keyboard on his end. "Ms. Greystone, if the charges are reversed, we will have to ask the guests to provide an alternative method of payment immediately. Or you will have to evict them." I finished for him. "This is a very delicate situation," he said, his voice tight. "I agree." I said, "That is why I am calling you now. I want to arrange a video call with you. I want to see you ask them for payment. I can't because it is against protocol." "Mr. Vance," I said, dropping my voice to a whisper, "if you don't do this, I will file a chargeback for negligence on your part for accepting a card where the signature clearly didn't match the ID of the user. Do you want a legal battle with Vanguard Trace Solutions' lead auditor, or do you want to help me resolve this quietly?" He paused. "I will bring the tablet to their table at dinner," he said, defeated. 7 p.m. Mountain Time. "Perfect," I said. I hung up. I stood up and walked to the full-length mirror in the corner of the room. I looked at myself. I was still wearing the clothes from the bank, but I looked disheveled. My hair was pulled back in a severe bun. My eyes were tired. No. That wouldn't do. I went to my suitcase. I pulled out my armor, the suit I wore when I had to fire executives for embezzlement. A sharp, navy blue blazer, a crisp white shirt. I applied red lipstick a shade called Victory. I brushed my hair until it shone. I looked at my reflection. The sad, lonely girl from Zurich was gone. The daughter who desperately wanted a hug was gone. In the mirror, I saw only the auditor, and the books were about to be balanced. I checked my watch. 1 hour until dinner in Aspen, 1 hour until the storm broke. I sat back down at the desk, interlaced my fingers, and waited. The silence in the house was no longer heavy, it was electric. It was the silence of a fuse burning down to the powder keg. The glow of 2 monitors was the only light in the study. On the left screen, I had a live feed of Bianca's Instagram account. On the right screen, I had the administrative portal for the First National Bank of Winnetka and the Visa Black Card dashboard. It was 7 in the evening in Aspen, Colorado, 8 in the evening here in Chicago. On the left screen, the scene was one of gluttonous excess. Bianca was live streaming. She was holding her phone high, the camera angled to capture the dim romantic lighting of the Diamond Suite's private dining room. "Hey guys," she cooed into the camera, her lips glossy and plump. "I just had to show you this. We are doing a private tasting menu tonight. Look at this." She panned the camera down. A silver platter rested on white linen, holding a mound of glistening black Osietra caviar. Next to it sat a bottle of Dom Perignon, condensation beating on the glass. "My dad is obsessed," she giggled, panning the camera to Robert. My father was tucking a napkin into his collar, his face red with wine and satisfaction. He raised a glass to the camera. "To the good life," he bellowed. My mother waved from the side, wearing the silk scarf I had bought her in Zurich, the one she had barely glanced at when I gave it to her. I watched them. I watched the likes rolling in on the side of the screen. Heart, heart, fire emoji. You guys are goals. They were eating my money. They were drinking my labor. Every spoonful of those fish eggs was a late night I had spent poring over spreadsheets in a lonely office in Singapore or London. I looked at the right screen. My cursor was hovering over a red button labeled Report Lost/Stolen. Immediate freeze. I took a sip of water. My hand was steady. My pulse was slow, rhythmic, like a metronome counting down to an explosion. "Enjoy the appetizer," I whispered. I clicked the mouse. A dialog box popped up. "Are you sure this will decline all pending transactions and alert merchants to confiscate the card?" I clicked Confirm. Then, I switched tabs to the joint checking account, the one I had already frozen at the bank branch. But now I was enacting the digital lockout for the secondary debit cards they carried. Status locked. I sat back and watched the Instagram feed. There was a delay. Of course. Real life lags behind the digital command by a few seconds. In the video, a waiter appeared. It was not just any waiter. It was Marcus Vance, the general manager I had spoken to earlier. He was holding a sleek black payment terminal. He leaned in, whispering something discreetly to my father. My father's smile faltered. He waved his hand dismissively and pointed at the card sitting on the table. I could see the mouth movements. "Just run it again." Marcus Vance nodded politely. He inserted the card. He waited. He shook his head. On the live stream, the comments started to change. "What is happening is the card declined? Awkward lol." Bianca noticed. She frowned, looking at the phone screen, then up at her father. "Dad, what is going on?" I grabbed my phone. I opened the family group chat, the one named Greystone Family Love, that had been silent for 2 days. I typed a single line. "The party is over. Check your email." I hit send. On the screen, 3 phones pinged simultaneously. Bianca stopped filming. The live stream ended abruptly, the screen going black. I closed the Instagram tab. I didn't need to see them anymore. I could imagine the rest perfectly. I visualized them opening their emails. I visualized the color draining from my mother's face as she saw the PDF titled The Greystone Matrix. I pictured my father squinting at the scanned image of the forged mortgage document, realizing that the stupid daughter he had underestimated had found the one piece of paper that could send his wife to prison. I visualized them reading the letter from Elias Thorne, my attorney. It was a masterpiece of legal aggression. It outlined the immediate freezing of assets, the intent to sue for forensic accounting costs, and the demand for repayment of $400,000 plus interest. 10 minutes passed. My phone rang. It was Bianca. I picked it up and put it on speaker, setting it gently on the mahogany desk. "Lavinia." Her voice was a shriek, distorted by panic and poor reception. Lavinia, what the hell is this? Hello, Bianca, I said, my voice smooth and cool, like polished stone. I assume you are calling about the email. You blocked the cards, she screamed. We are at dinner. The manager is standing here telling us we have to pay $4,000 for the meal and the room deposit immediately or he is calling the police. That sounds stressful, I said. You should probably pay him, with what she yelled. You froze the joint accounts. You froze everything. Dad's cards are being declined. My cards are being declined. We have no cash. That is unfortunate. I said, perhaps you can use the profits from your thriving internet business that Mom tells the neighbors about. There was a silence on the other end, heavy and suffocating. Then, my father's voice came on the line. He had grabbed the phone from her. Lavinia, listen to me, he growled. You are making a mistake, a big mistake. You are humiliating us in a 5-star hotel. Undo this. Undo it right now. And we will talk about this when we get home. There is nothing to talk about. Robert, I said. I stopped calling him Dad. The word felt wrong now. And I am not humiliating you. I am simply mitigating my financial exposure. As the victim of identity theft and credit card fraud, I have a legal obligation to stop the bleeding. Fraud, he sputtered. How dare you? We are your parents. You forged my signature on a $400,000 mortgage, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Becoming lethal. You embezzled $300,000 from a trust fund designed for your health care. You stole $45,000 for this vacation. That is not parenting. That is a felony. We intended to pay you back, my mother wailed in the background. With what money, I asked. With the money Bianca lost gambling. With the money you spent on handbags. The math does not work. Lavinia, please, Bianca sobbed. Her arrogance completely shattered. They are going to kick us out. It is snowing. We have nowhere to go. I glanced at the window. The snow was falling in Chicago. 2. The hotel has a policy. I said, if you cannot pay, you must vacate. I suggest you sell the jewelry I bought you. That Patek Philippe watch should cover the dinner and a cheap motel for the night. You bitch, Bianca screamed. You jealous, miserable bitch. You planned this. You wanted to ruin our Christmas. I didn't ruin your Christmas. I said, I just stopped paying for it. Oh, and one more thing. What she hissed. I canceled your return flights. What I called United Airlines 10 minutes ago, I said, examining my fingernails. Since the tickets were purchased with the fraudulent card, they were voided. You are stranded in Colorado. You will have to find your own way home. Good luck. I hung up the phone. The silence that rushed back into the room was exquisite. It wasn't lonely. It was clean. It was the silence of a balance sheet that finally equaled 0. But I wasn't done. The revenge was not just about money. It was about responsibility. They had left 2 5-year-old boys in the care of a woman they treated like a servant, assuming I would just absorb the burden. I needed to make sure they understood the gravity of abandonment. I stood up and walked out of the study. I went to the West Wing, where Mrs. Clara and her colleague were watching the twins. The boys were asleep. Finally, Mrs. Clara, I said softly. She looked up from her book. Yes, Ms. Greystone, I need to terminate your contract. She looked confused. Now. But you paid for 24 hours. I know. I said, but the situation has changed. I am leaving the house. Leaving, she asked, standing up. But the parents are in Aspen. Who will watch the children? That is the problem, isn't it? I said. The parents are in Aspen. The legal guardian is not present, and I am not their legal guardian. I have no legal authority to make medical decisions for them or to care for them. Mrs. Clara's eyes widened. Ms. Greystone, you can't just leave them alone. I am not leaving them alone. I said, I am calling the authorities to ensure they are safe. I handed her an envelope containing a generous tip, $500 cash. Thank you for your service. You can go. She hesitated, looking at the sleeping boys, then at me. She saw the resolve in my eyes. She took the envelope and nodded slowly. Good luck, Miss Greystone. When the front door closed behind the nannies, I was alone in the house with the sleeping twins. I picked up my phone again. My hands were trembling slightly now, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of crossing a line from which there was no return. This was the nuclear option. This was the move that would burn the bridge so thoroughly that not even ash would remain. I dialed the number for the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. Hotline, state your emergency. My name is Lavinia Greystone, I said, my voice steady. I am reporting a case of child abandonment at, I gave the address. Abandonment, the operator asked. Yes, I said. The parents, Bianca and Jason Miller, have left the state for a vacation. The grandparents are with them. They left the children, aged 5, without a legal guardian. I was coerced into coming here, but I must return to my home in Switzerland immediately for work. There is no one here to care for these children. They are alone in the house. You are leaving them alone, the operator asked, her voice sharp. I am waiting for you to arrive. I said, but I cannot stay. I have a flight. The parents have been notified that they need to return, but they are refusing. The children are currently safe and sleeping, but they need protective custody until the parents return. Stay on the line, the operator ordered. We are dispatching an officer and a social worker. Do not leave until they arrive. I will wait, I said. I hung up. I walked into the living room and sat in the dark. This was cruel. I knew it was cruel. The twins were innocent in this, but this was the only way to force my family's hand. If I just left, Bianca would claim I abandoned them. She would spin the story. But by calling DCFS myself, by creating an official government record stating that they left the state without securing a guardian, I was creating a paper trail that would haunt them. They would have to fly back immediately by bus, by train, by hitchhiking to get their children out of foster care. They would face an investigation. They would be forced to answer why they were at a 5-star resort while their children were dumped on an unwilling relative. It was the ultimate reality check. 30 minutes later, the flashing lights of a police cruiser illuminated the snow-covered front lawn. I stood up, I buttoned my coat, I picked up my suitcase, I opened the door to the officer. They are in the west bedroom. I said, here's the contact information for the parents in Aspen. Tell them the children are safe, but they need to come home. Now, the officer looked at me with a mixture of confusion and judgment. You are the aunt. Yes, I said, and you are just handing them over. I am a forensic auditor. Officer, I said, walking past him into the snowy night. I identify liabilities, and those children are a liability their parents failed to secure. I walked down the driveway to the Uber waiting at the curb. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the flashing lights. I got into the car. O'Hare Airport, International Terminal. I said. The car pulled away. The climax was over. The explosion had happened. Now, I would watch the fallout from a safe distance, while they crawled through the wreckage I had left behind. I did not witness the fall of the House of Greystone with my own eyes, but thanks to the high-definition security system I had installed 3 years ago, and which I still had remote access to, I was able to watch the finale from the comfort of my hotel room in Chicago. I sat with a glass of Pinot Noir, scrolling through the footage timeline, piecing together the 20-hour journey of humiliation that brought my family back to reality. It began in Aspen. According to the police report filed by the hotel manager, the scene in the Diamond Suite was nothing short of operatic. When the credit cards were declined and the police were threatened, my father, Robert, had tried to bluster his way out. He had screamed about knowing senators and bankers. But the hotel manager, Marcus Vance, was unmoved. The bill for the dinner and the room deposit was over $5,000. They had no cash. Their return flights were canceled. In the end, it was the Patek Philippe watch, the $12,000 peace offering I had bought my father less than 48 hours prior, that saved them from a jail cell. He had to hand it over to a local pawn shop recommended by the concierge, receiving a paltry $3,000 in cash, a 75% loss. It was a terrible financial decision, but desperation rarely negotiates good rates. They could not afford last-minute airfare during the holiday peak season. One-way tickets were going for $2,000 a seat. So, The family that had flown there dreaming of private jets and caviar had to trudge through the snow to the Greyhound bus station. I can only imagine the bus ride. 20 hours on a coach bus winding through the snowy Midwest. No legroom, no champagne. Just the smell of diesel fumes, the sound of coughing strangers, and the cramped misery of 4 adults and 2 crying children squeezed into narrow seats. The security cameras at the Winnetka house picked up their arrival at 2 a.m. A yellow taxi, the cheapest one available, pulled up to the curb. They didn't pull into the driveway because the driveway was blocked by a chain. I watched on the screen as my father stepped out first. He looked 10 years older than he had on the live stream. His coat was wrinkled, his face gray with exhaustion. My mother followed, shivering in her fur coat, which now looked ridiculous rather than glamorous against the backdrop of their defeat. Bianca dragged herself out, holding a sleeping twin in each arm. Her face a mask of smudged makeup and pure fury. Jason, her husband, trailed behind, carrying the few bags they hadn't been forced to check or lose. They walked up the driveway, slipping on the ice I hadn't paid anyone to clear. My father reached the front door. He fumbled in his pocket for his keys. He jammed the key into the lock and turned it. It didn't move. He jiggled it. He pulled it out and tried again. He slammed his shoulder against the wood. "Open the damn door," he shouted, his voice cracking in the cold night air. It wouldn't open. I had the locksmith change the tumblers the moment the nannies left. Then, my mother saw it. She reached out a trembling hand and ripped a sheet of paper that had been taped to the center of the door at eye level. It was a bright orange legal notice. The security camera resolution was crisp enough that I could read the bold header even from my laptop screen. Notice of default and intent to foreclose. Property seized. Pending fraud investigation. My mother collapsed. She didn't faint elegantly like in the movies. She just slid down the doorframe until she hit the wet concrete, clutching the paper to her chest. "What is it?" Bianca screamed, dropping the bags. "What does it say?" "She locked us out," my father whispered, staring at the deadbolt. "She actually locked us out. Call her," Bianca yelled. "Call that bitch right now." I saw them pull out their phones. On my end, my phone remained silent. I had blocked their numbers, their emails, and their social media profiles hours ago. I was a ghost. For 20 minutes, they stood on the porch, banging on the door, screaming my name into the wind. The neighbors' lights flickered on. Mrs. Gable peeked through her curtains. The shame was public now. Finally, Jason used a rock from the garden to smash the small window pane on the side door leading to the kitchen. It was breaking and entering, technically, but it was their own house, or so they thought. They climbed in, one by one. I switched the camera feed to the interior view. The kitchen lights flickered on. I watched them stop dead in their tracks. The house was not empty, but it was hollow. During the 6 hours I had waited for the police to arrive for the children, I had been busy. I had called a junk removal service and a local charity. The 85-inch television in the living room gone. The imported Italian leather sofa where Bianca filmed her TikToks, gone. The espresso machine gone. The oil paintings in the hallway, gone. I had stripped the house of every single item I had purchased over the last decade. If I had paid for it, it left with me. I had donated the furniture to a women's shelter and sold the electronics to a pawn shop for cash, which I then donated to the shelter as well. The house echoed. It was just walls and floorboards. They wandered through the rooms like survivors of a bombing. Bianca ran to the basement studio. It was bare. Her ring light, her backdrop, her props all bought with my supplementary card were gone. They gathered in the kitchen, the only room that still had the built-in appliances I couldn't rip out. On the granite island, sitting alone in the center of the vast, empty counter, was a small digital voice recorder. My father picked it up. His hand was shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He pressed play. My voice filled the room, amplified by the acoustics of the empty house. "Welcome home," or should I say, "Welcome to the property of the bank. I noticed you were confused about ownership, so I clarified it for you. Everything that was missing from this house was purchased with my funds. I have simply repossessed my assets. As for the house itself, since the mortgage was secured via a forged signature, I have alerted the lender. They have accelerated the debt. You owe the full balance of $400,000 immediately, or the foreclosure proceeds. Good luck." The recording ended with a sharp click. My mother put her head on the counter and began to wail. It was a primal, ugly sound. Bianca, however, was staring at her phone. She had finally reconnected to the Wi-Fi. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What?" Jason snapped. "What now?" Bianca turned the phone screen toward them. Look at my Instagram." I couldn't see the screen from the camera, but I knew what was there. I had created an anonymous account called The Greystone Truth and tagged Bianca in every single post. I had uploaded the receipts, the side-by-side photos of her claiming to fly private versus the credit card bill for economy seats, the emails calling me an ATM, the foreclosure notice. The internet is a cruel place, but it loves justice. The comments section on Bianca's influencer page was a bloodbath. "So you are a fraud. You stole from your sister lol. Nice fake life. My followers." Bianca sobbed, sliding to the floor. "They are destroying me. Everyone knows. The whole town knows. The twins, who had been sleeping on the floor in their coats because there were no beds left, started to cry. They were hungry. They were cold. The heating had been turned down to 50 degrees to save money. My money. I want pizza," Leo screamed. "I want Auntie Vinny." "Shut up," my father roared. He slammed his fist onto the counter. "Shut up, all of you." Then he stopped. On the black and white grainy footage of the security camera, I saw my father clutch his left arm. He grabbed the edge of the counter, his face contorting in genuine agony. This was not the fake heart attack from 2 days ago. This was visceral. His knees buckled. He collapsed onto the tiled floor with a heavy thud. "Robert," my mother shrieked. "Jason, call 911, Bianca yelled. Dropping her phone, I watched Jason fumble with his mobile. He was shouting into the receiver. "Heart attack. Yes. Winnetka, please hurry." I sat in my hotel room, my hand hovering over my mouth. I wanted justice. I wanted them to pay, but watching my father writhe on the floor, gasping for air, sent a jolt of cold fear through me. I was still human. But then, I remembered the conversation in the study. She is clueless. She won't ask questions. I watched the paramedics arrive 10 minutes later. They were efficient. They loaded him onto a stretcher. They hooked him up to monitors. As they were wheeling him out, one of the paramedics turned to my mother. "We need his insurance card." "Ma'am, for the hospital admission." My mother frantically dug through her purse. She pulled out the platinum card, the one attached to the policy I paid for. The policy that cost me $2,000 a month. "Here," she cried. "Take it." The paramedic took the card. He radioed the details to the dispatch center. He paused. He tapped his earpiece. "Ma'am," he said, stopping the stretcher at the door, "dispatch says this policy was terminated yesterday. Do you have another form of payment or a different insurance provider?" My mother stared at him. "Terminated. The policyholder canceled it." The paramedic said, "We can still take him, of course. It is an emergency, but without insurance, you will be billed directly. The ambulance ride alone is $3,000. The cardiac care unit will be significant." My mother looked at my father, whose face was pale and sweating. She looked at the empty house. She looked at the notice on the door. She realized then that the safety net was gone. I wasn't just the ATM. I was the ground beneath their feet, and I had turned into quicksand. "Just take him," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "We will pay. We will find a way." I watched the ambulance lights flash against the snow as they drove away. I closed the laptop. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I felt a strange, hollow sense of completion. They were alive. My father would survive. The American healthcare system treats you first and bankrupts you later. But the lesson had been delivered. They were on their own. For the first time in 30 years, the Greystones were going to have to pay their own bills. I finished my wine. It tasted like ash, but it was the truth. And the truth is always an acquired taste. They say that a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. In the case of the Greystone family, the lie didn't just travel. It took a private jet, drank champagne, and live-streamed itself to 10,000 followers. I sat in the executive suite of the Langham Hotel in downtown Chicago, wrapped in a plush robe that cost more than my father's weekly grocery budget. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city was a grid of steel and snow, beautiful and cold. Inside, my laptop screen was a portal into a sewer. The smear campaign had begun at 8 in the morning. Bianca fired the first shot. She posted a photo of herself sitting on the floor of the empty living room in Winnetka, clutching one of the twins. She had clearly used a filter to make her skin look paler, her eyes larger and more watery. The caption was a masterpiece of creative writing. "We are heartbroken. Yesterday, my sister Lavinia Greystone came home from Europe. We thought she was coming to help our sick father. Instead, she took advantage of his medical emergency to evict us. She threw her own nephews out into the snow. She stole our furniture. She emptied our bank accounts. We are sleeping on the floor. My father is in the hospital fighting for his life. And she has blocked us. Please pray for us. We are victims of a monster." Then came my mother, Sylvia Greystone, who had never understood how to use Facebook privacy settings, wrote a public status update that was immediately shared by 50 of her friends. "I gave birth to a viper. Lavinia has abandoned us. She has left her parents destitute in their old age. All we ever did was love her, and she has repaid us with cruelty. She is rich, successful, and heartless. She would rather see us freeze than share a penny of her fortune." The reaction was immediate and toxic. The internet loves a villain, and my family had cast me as the Wicked Witch of the West. My inbox began to fill with hate mail. People I hadn't spoken to in 20 years, distant cousins, former high school classmates, neighbors felt entitled to weigh in. "How do you sleep at night?" one message read. "You are disgusting. Your father is dying and you care about money," read another. "I hope you rot." Read a third. I read them all. I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel the urge to cry. Years of auditing had taught me that emotional outbursts are usually a smokescreen for guilt. When a CFO screams at me during an investigation, I know I'm close to the fraud. When my family screamed on social media, I knew they were terrified. They were trying to win the court of public opinion because they knew they had already lost in the court of law. I took a sip of my coffee. It was black, strong, and bitter. "You want a war?" I whispered to the screen. "Fine. But in a war of information, you do not bring tears to a data fight." I opened a new tab. For the past 12 hours, I had not just been drinking wine. I had been coding. I had purchased a domain name, thegreystonetruth.com. It was a simple, minimalist website. No ads, no clutter, just a clean, white background with black text. At the top, in bold letters, was a single header: receipts. I began to upload. Section 1, the destitute parents. I uploaded the side-by-side comparison. On the left, my mother's Facebook post claiming they were struggling. On the right, the bank statement from last week showing a purchase of a $4,000 handbag and a transaction at the Golden Lotus Spa. Section 2, the sick father. I uploaded the video clip I had saved from Bianca's live stream in Aspen, the one where Robert Greystone, the man fighting for his life, was drinking champagne and shouting, "To the good life," just hours after allegedly suffering a heart attack. I added the timestamp, filmed 48 hours after alleged cardiac event. Section 3, the monster sister. This was the heavy artillery. I uploaded the PDF of the forged mortgage document. I used a digital highlighter to circle the signature. Below it, I posted the affidavit from a handwriting expert I had retained online that morning, confirming the signature was a clumsy forgery. I added the caption, "I did not evict them. The bank is foreclosing because they took out a $4,000 loan in my name, without my consent, and spent it. I am simply refusing to pay for a crime I did not commit." Section 4. The checkmate. I sat back and looked at the audio file icon. It was the recording from the kitchen recorder. The one where they mocked me. The one where my mother said, "She is clueless. She won't check." The one where Bianca called me an ATM. I clicked upload. The file processed. The bar turned green. Upload complete. I drafted a short, concise post on my own dormant Facebook page. I tagged Bianca, my mother, and every single person who had sent me a hate message. There are two sides to every story. Here is the documentation for mine. If you are going to judge the evidence, not the tears. Link below. I hit post. Then, I leaned back and waited. The reaction was not a ripple. It was a tsunami. The internet is a fickle beast. It loves a victim. But there is one thing it loves more than a victim exposing a liar. The receipts culture that Bianca tried to exploit turned on her with savage speed. Within an hour, the comments on Bianca's tearful post began to change. Wait, is this true? Did you really spend $45,000 on a vacation with a stolen card? I just listened to the audio. You guys are sociopaths. You called your sister an ATM, and you expect sympathy team Lavinia. The narrative collapsed. The neighbors who had been clucking their tongues in sympathy suddenly realized they had been played. The distant cousins who had sent hate mail started deleting their messages, terrified of being associated with the fraudsters. But the real damage wasn't just social, it was structural. I had included a specific section in the data dump titled, "Where the Money Went." I had broken down the spending of the investment money I had sent. In that spreadsheet, I highlighted the transfers to BetKings Online. 30 minutes after the site went live, my phone rang. It was a blocked number, but I knew who it was. I let it go to voicemail. Then, a text came through from Bianca. It wasn't angry this time. It was frantic. "Take it down. Take it down now." Jason saw the spreadsheet. He saw the gambling debts. He thinks I knew. He is leaving me. I stared at the text. So, Bianca hadn't known the full extent of her husband's addiction. She thought they were just spending my money on clothes. She didn't know Jason was blowing thousands of dollars on virtual poker while she played the influencer. I didn't reply. Collateral damage. Then, the second shoe dropped. My email pinged. It was a notification from a contact I had at the IRS. I had anonymously tipped them off about the gift income my father had been receiving from my trust fund income he had never declared on his taxes because he wanted to keep his bracket low for his state pension. Subject inquiry regarding Robert Greystone. Body. The audit flag has been raised. Unreported income in excess of $300,000 over 5 years. Investigation pending. Robert Greystone wasn't just facing a hospital bill he couldn't pay. He was facing the federal government. And finally, the social death of Sylvia Greystone. I received a screenshot from Mrs. Gable, the neighbor. It was a message from the Winnetka Garden Club group chat. Administrator. In light of recent revelations regarding the financial conduct of certain members, the board has voted to suspend Sylvia Greystone's membership indefinitely. We do not associate with fraud. My mother's life, her status, her bridge club, her carefully curated image of suburban perfection had evaporated in the span of an afternoon. I stood up and walked to the window. The sun was setting over Chicago, casting long, bloody streaks of orange across the gray sky. It was time to end it. I didn't want them in jail. Jail would be too easy. Jail provides 3 meals a day and a bed. No, I wanted them to work. I wanted them to feel the weight of every dollar they had stolen from me. I opened a document I had drafted with Elias Thorne, my lawyer. It was a binding legal agreement, a confession of judgment. I attached it to an email addressed to all 3 of them. Subject, the ultimatum, to Robert, Sylvia, and Bianca. By now, you have seen the website. You know that I have the evidence to send all 3 of you to prison for fraud, forgery, and identity theft. The police are already interested, and the bank is preparing their own charges. However, I am willing to offer a one-time alternative. Attached is a document. It is a confession of judgment. By signing this, you admit to the debt of $745,000, the mortgage, the trust fund, the credit cards, and the legal fees. The terms are as follows: 1. You will sell the Winnetka house immediately. All equity will go toward the debt. 2. You will agree to a garnish of 25% of all future wages until the remaining balance is paid in full. 3. You will repay me the remaining balance over a period of 20 years. Interest will be set at 5%. 4. You will never contact me again, except through my attorney for payment confirmation. If this document is not signed and notarized by 9 in the morning tomorrow, I will hand the full unredacted file to the district attorney. The choice is yours. You can be debtors, or you can be inmates. Lavinia. I hit send. I closed the laptop. My hands were steady. My heart was calm. I went to the hotel bar. I ordered a glass of the most expensive champagne on the menu, a vintage Dom Perignon, the same bottle they had been drinking in Aspen. When it arrived, I didn't toast to the good life. I raised the glass to the empty room, to the audit. I whispered. I took a sip. It tasted like victory, cold, crisp, and absolute. The smear campaign had backfired. The boomerang they threw had returned to shatter their own glass house, and I was the only one left holding a stone. I checked my phone one last time. A notification from the website analytics. Unique visitors. 50,000. Most shared link. The audio recording. I smiled. The truth didn't just put on its shoes. It had run a marathon and crossed the finish line while they were still tying their laces. The conference room at the law firm of Thorne Associates was designed to intimidate. It was situated on the 45th floor of a glass obelisk in downtown Chicago, offering a panoramic view of the frozen lake and the city that sprawled out like a circuit board. The table was a slab of black marble, cold to the touch, and long enough to seat 20 people. Today, however, there were only 6 of us. I sat at the head of the table. I was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that I had commissioned in London, tailored to razor-sharp perfection. My hair was pulled back in a severe, tight chignon. I wore no jewelry except for a simple pair of pearl earrings. I looked like what I was the person holding the pen. The checkbook and the axe. Across from me sat the ruins of the Greystone dynasty. They looked small. That was the first thing I noticed. Without the staging of social media, without the expensive clothes I had inadvertently paid for, and without the arrogance that had fueled them for decades, they looked diminished. My father, Robert, sat in a wheelchair. The hospital had discharged him that morning, but only because his insurance, or lack thereof, made him a financial liability they were eager to offload. He was wearing a tracksuit that had seen better days. His skin was gray, hanging loosely on his frame. He refused to look at me. My mother, Sylvia, sat next to him. She was wearing a coat that was missing a button. Her hair, usually dyed a vibrant, expensive blonde, was showing an inch of steel-gray roots. Her eyes were swollen, red-rimmed, and darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for a vent. And Bianca, my sister, the influencer, the boss babe, she looked the worst of all. She was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing the stress lines and the dark circles of a woman who had spent the last 48 hours being savaged by the entire internet. She slumped in her chair, staring at her hands. Next to her sat Jason, her husband. He was the only one who looked angry rather than defeated. He sat with his arms crossed, distancing himself physically from Bianca by leaning away from her. The silence in the room was thick enough to choke on. The only sound was the hum of the HVAC system and the scratching of my lawyer, Elias Thorne, arranging a stack of documents on the marble. Elias cleared his throat. "We are here to execute the confession of judgment and the accompanying settlement agreement," Elias said, his voice dry and professional. As Ms. Greystone outlined in her email, "This is a non-negotiable alternative to criminal prosecution." My father made a noise. It was a guttural, wet sound. He gripped the armrests of his wheelchair. "Lavinia," he croaked. He looked up, his eyes watery and pleading. "Lavinia, look at me. I am your father." I looked at him. I held his gaze with a terrifying calmness. I am looking at you. Robert, this is insanity, he stammered, his voice gaining a fraction of its old bluster. We made mistakes. Yes, we borrowed money. We were going to pay it back. But dragging us here? Threatening jail? We are family. You don't destroy family over money. I didn't blink. You didn't borrow money, I said softly. You stole it. There is a difference. If you had asked me for help with the mortgage, I might have said yes. If you had told me you were drowning in debt, I would have helped you restructure. But you didn't ask. You stole. You forged my name. You made me an accomplice to your fraud without my consent. I did it for your mother, he shouted, though the shout was weak. Cracking at the edges, she needed security. She needed to feel safe. And so you robbed her daughter, I asked. That is an interesting definition of protection. He slumped back, deflated. The attempt at authority had failed. The evidence, the stack of papers sitting between us, was a wall he could not shout down. Then, my mother started to cry. It wasn't the polite, dab-the-eyes crying she used to get out of speeding tickets. This was ugly, heaving sobbing. Her shoulders shook. She reached across the table, her hand trembling as she tried to touch my arm. I pulled back. Vinny, she wailed. Please, we are old. We have nothing. They took the furniture. The neighbors won't talk to us. I can't show my face at the grocery store. Everyone knows. You have humiliated us enough. Please, just stop this. Just forgive the debt. You have so much money. You won't even miss it. I watched a tear roll down her cheek and drip onto the expensive marble table. I remembered all the times she had used those tears. She cried when I wanted to go to a state university instead of the expensive private one they wanted to brag about. She cried when I missed Christmas 3 years ago to work. She cried whenever she wanted to soften me up for a check. But looking at her now, I felt nothing. The emotional cord that connects a child to a mother had been severed, cauterized by the heat of their betrayal. I leaned forward. Mom, I said, my voice barely a whisper. She looked up, hope flickering in her wet eyes. Your tears are too expensive, I said. I cannot afford to buy them anymore. The price has gone up, and I am out of the market. The hope vanished, replaced by a look of pure shock. She realized, perhaps for the first time, that the Bank of Lavinia was not just closed, it had been demolished. Elias slid the papers across the table. Let us review the terms, he said, ignoring the emotional display. Point 1. The property at 14 Oak Street, Winnetka, will be listed for sale immediately. The proceeds will go to pay off the fraudulent second mortgage held by the bank. Any remaining equity will be applied to the debt owed to Ms. Gates, Greystone. We will be homeless, my mother whispered. You will rent. I corrected, like millions of other people. I suggest a 2-bedroom apartment, perhaps in a less expensive zip code. Point 2. Elias continued. The remaining debt is calculated at $345,000. This includes the trust fund embezzlement and the credit card theft. All 3 of you, Robert, Sylvia, and Bianca, will sign this document agreeing to a garnish of 25% of your future wages until the debt is satisfied. Wages, Bianca spoke for the first time. Her voice was raspy. I don't have a job. I am an influencer. Not anymore, I said. I checked your analytics this morning. You have lost 80% of your followers. The brands have dropped you. You are toxic. Bianca, you are going to have to get a real job. Doing what she spat, a flash of her old venom returning. I don't care, I said. Wait tables, answer phones, scrub floors. You are 34 years old. It is time you contributed to society instead of feeding off it. She glared at me, hatred burning in her eyes. You are enjoying this. I am not enjoying it. I said honestly, I am balancing the books. Elias cleared his throat again. Point 3. The matter of Mr. Jason Miller. Jason sat up straighter. He looked at me, then at Bianca. I am not signing anything, Jason said. Bianca turned to him. What, Jason? We have to. She will go to the police. You have to, Jason said. Standing up. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. I didn't steal the money. You did. You told me the trip was a gift from your parents. You told me the Porsche was a bonus from your business. Jason, don't, Bianca pleaded, reaching for his hand. He snatched it away. I didn't know you were funding our life with stolen credit cards, Jason said, his voice loud in the quiet room. I am a gambler. Bianca, I know that. I have problems. But I'm not a thief, and I'm not going to prison for you. He tossed the envelope onto the table in front of her. What is this? She whispered. Divorce papers, Jason said. I filed this morning. I am citing fraud and irreconcilable differences. I am taking the car well. The bank is taking the car, and I am moving back to my brother's place in Ohio. Bianca stared at the envelope. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The illusion of her perfect life, the handsome husband, the luxury cars, the status, it all dissolved in that second. She wasn't a boss babe. She was a divorcee with a mountain of debt and a criminal record hanging over her head. I am done, Jason said to me. I will sign an affidavit stating I had no knowledge of the source of funds, but I'm not paying your debt. Lavinia. I looked at him. I knew he was lying about not knowing. He had to have suspected, but he was smart enough to jump off the sinking ship. Fine, I said. If you testify against them regarding the gambling transfers, I will absolve you of the debt liability. Deal, Jason said. He didn't look at his wife. He walked out of the room without looking back. Bianca let out a scream that sounded like an animal in a trap. She put her head on the table and howled. My mother wrapped her arms around her, and the two of them wept together, a tableau of total ruin. My father sat in his wheelchair, staring at the wall, his face blank. He was watching his legacy burn, and he had no water to throw on it. Sign the papers, I said. It took 10 minutes. The scratching of the pen on paper was loud. Scratch, scratch, scratch. They signed away their house. They signed away their future income. They signed an admission of guilt that would prevent them from ever denying what they had done. When it was over, Elias collected the documents. There is one last thing, I said. They looked up, terrified. What more could I possibly take the twins? I said. Bianca wiped her nose with her sleeve. You want to take my children? No, I said. I am not a kidnapper, but those boys are the only innocent people in this entire mess, and I will not watch them suffer because their mother and grandparents are incompetent. I pulled a single sheet of paper from my portfolio. I have established an irrevocable educational trust for Leo and Lucas. I said. Bianca's eyes widened. Money, not for you, I said sharply. The trust is blind. You cannot access it. You cannot see the balance. You cannot borrow against it. The funds are paid directly to the educational institutions. It will cover their tuition, their books, and their uniforms until they graduate from college, if you try to touch a single cent of it. The trust dissolves, and the money goes to charity. Do you understand? Bianca looked at me. For a moment, the hatred in her eyes softened into something else. Confusion, shame, gratitude. It was hard to tell. Thank you, she whispered. I didn't acknowledge it. I stood up. I buttoned my suit jacket. This concludes our business, I said. I walked around the table. I stood behind my chair. Aren't you going to hug us? My mother asked, her voice small and broken. Aren't you going to say goodbye? I looked at them. The three people who shared my DNA. The people I had spent 32 years trying to please. The people who would have bled me dry and stepped over my carcass to get to the next buffet. I looked at the door. Goodbye, Mr. and Mrs. Greystone. I said, goodbye, Mrs. Miller. I turned and walked toward the exit. Lavinia. My father called out. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I walked out of the conference room and into the hallway. The heavy glass door swung shut behind me with a pneumatic hiss, sealing them inside. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button for the lobby. My chest felt tight. A sharp, physical pain radiated from my sternum. It was grief. It was the mourning of the family I wished I had, the death of the fantasy that they would one day love me for me. But as the elevator doors opened and I stepped into the empty car, The pain began to fade. It was replaced by a sensation I hadn't felt in years. Weightlessness. I took a deep breath. The air in the elevator was cool and sterile. I realized then that I hadn't lost a family. You lose a set of keys. You lose a wallet. You lose things that have value. I hadn't lost anything. I had performed a surgical extraction. I had cut out a malignant tumor that had been feeding on my blood, growing fat on my stress, and poisoning my life. The surgery was painful. Yes, the recovery would take time. There would be a scar, but I was going to live. I watched the floor numbers count down on the display. 40, 30, 20. I was going down to the ground floor, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was rising. I walked out of the building and into the cold Chicago wind. It hit my face, sharp and biting, but it felt clean. I hailed a taxi. O'Hare Airport. I said to the driver, "Where are you headed?" he asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Home," I said, and this time, I knew exactly where that was. The seasons in Zurich are distinct, marking the passage of time with a precision that I have come to admire. It has been exactly 1 year since that fateful phone call in this very apartment, the call that pulled me back to Chicago and into the heart of a familial catastrophe. But the woman standing by the window tonight is not the same woman who stood here 12 months ago. The view is the same. The Limit River still carves its way through the old town, and the church bells still toll with ancient regularity. But the silence in my penthouse is different. It is no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of isolation. It is the peaceful, warm silence of a sanctuary. I am no longer just a senior forensic auditor. 6 months ago, the board of Vanguard Trace Solutions voted unanimously to promote me. I am now a senior partner. My name is on the glass door of the corner office. I have equity. I have power that is recognized and respected. Not for my checkbook, but for my mind. But the most significant change is not in my title. It is in the report lying open on my coffee table. It arrived yesterday via courier from New York, sent by my attorney, Elias Thorne. It was the final dossier on the Greystone recovery, as we had formally named the file. I walked over to the table and picked up the document. I didn't feel the old spike of adrenaline or the twist of anxiety. I felt only a calm, detached curiosity. The house in Winnetka is gone. It sold 6 months ago. Just as the market was cooling, Elias was ruthless in the negotiations. The sale price was just enough to cover the fraudulent second mortgage my mother had taken out and the bulk of the debt they owed me. There was no profit. There was no nest egg left over for them to squander. The report detailed their current living situation. They are renting a 2-bedroom apartment in a complex near the highway, 40 minutes west of their old life. It is a walk-up. 3rd floor, no elevator. I turned the page to the employment verification section. Robert Greystone, the man who used to boast about his golf handicap and his connections, is currently employed as a cashier at a chain grocery store. The report noted that he works the morning shift. I closed my eyes for a moment, imagining him. I imagined him standing on his feet for 8 hours, scanning coupons, asking customers if they have a loyalty card, forced to be polite to people he would have once looked down upon. Sylvia Greystone is working in the same store, in the bakery department. She packages bread and cookies. The woman who claimed her hands were too delicate for housework is now waking up at 4 a.m. to slice bagels. And Bianca? My sister. The aspiring influencer who thought the world owed her a living. She is working as a server at a diner, not a high-end bistro, a diner, the kind where the menus are sticky and the coffee is bottomless. The report mentioned that she is also taking night classes at a community college, studying medical billing. I set the report down. It was a harsh reality. To an outsider, it might look like a tragedy, but I knew the truth. For the first time in their lives, they were earning their existence. They were learning the lesson that most people learn at 18. They were learning that money is an exchange of energy, not a magic trick performed by a relative you despise. I was not happy that they were struggling. I took no joy in the idea of my father's aching back or my sister's tired feet. But I felt a profound sense of rightness. The scales had balanced. They were surviving. They were eating. They had a roof over their heads. But they were doing it on their own merits. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. The sound was bright and cheerful. I opened the door, and a wave of noise and cold air rushed in. Lavinia, Merry Christmas. It was Marco, a brilliant architect I had met at a gallery opening 3 months ago. Behind him was Elena, a neurosurgeon, and Sarah, a teacher who made me laugh harder than anyone I had ever known. They piled into the apartment, their arms full of bags. We brought the wine, Marco announced, kicking off his snowy boots, and Sarah made that dip she promised, though I think she ate half of it in the taxi. I did not, Sarah protested, laughing as she hugged me. You look stunning. Lavinia, is that a new dress? It is, I said, smiling. I bought it for myself. We moved into the living room. Unlike last year, when I had sat alone in the dark, the room was now alive with light. I had bought a massive, real pine tree. It touched the ceiling. The scent of fresh needles filled the air, masking the sterile smell of modern luxury. We spent the next 2 hours decorating. We didn't use a curated color scheme. We used ornaments we had found at the Christmas market, wooden soldiers, glass birds, silly felt reindeers. We drank mulled wine and listened to jazz. For the first time in my life, I wasn't wondering if the people in the room liked me for what I could buy them. Marco didn't need my money. Elena made more than I did. Sarah was simply a kind soul who enjoyed my company. We were friends, real friends, the kind who would pick you up from the airport in a snowstorm without asking for a dime. As the night wound down and they left, promising to meet for brunch the next day, I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the wine. I began to tidy up. On the mantelpiece, tucked behind a garland of ivy, was an envelope I had saved for last. It had arrived with the legal dossier, forwarded by Elias. I opened it. It was a piece of construction paper, folded in half. On the front, in crayon, was a drawing. It depicted 3 stick figures. One was tall, with long dark hair. The other 2 were small and holding hands. Inside, in the shaky block letters of a 6-year-old who is just learning to write, it said, "Thank you, Auntie V, for school. We like the playground. Love, Leo and Lucas." I ran my thumb over the wax crayon. I had kept my promise. The trust fund was paying for their tuition at a private school near their new apartment. It also paid for their uniforms and their lunch accounts. Bianca couldn't touch the money, but the boys were safe. They were getting an education. They were getting a chance to break the cycle of entitlement and ignorance that had plagued our family. I placed the card on the mantel, front and center. It was the only decoration that mattered. Then, I reached into the drawer of the side table. I pulled out a photograph. It was an old one, taken 10 years ago. It showed the 4 of us, my parents, Bianca, and me standing in front of the Winnetka house. We were all smiling. I looked at my own face in the photo. I looked so eager, so desperate to be included. I looked at my father's hand resting on Bianca's shoulder. While I stood a little apart, I walked over to the fireplace. The flames were dying down, glowing with orange embers. I sat on the rug, the same spot where I had once cried over their neglect. I looked at the photo one last time. Revenge is a heavy word. People think it means inflicting pain. They think it means destroying someone else's life to make yourself feel better. But that is not what I had done. I hadn't destroyed them. I had simply stopped saving them. I had stopped being the cushion that absorbed their falls. I had removed the artificial supports and let gravity take its course. That is not cruelty. That is physics. And in doing so, I had saved myself. I had reclaimed my dignity. I had reclaimed my future. I tossed the photo into the fire. The paper curled instantly. The flames licked at the edges, turning the smiles into ash. I watched it burn until there was nothing left but a curl of gray smoke disappearing up the chimney. I felt lighter. The last tether was cut. I poured myself a final glass of wine, a rich, dark Cabernet. I walked to the window to watch the snow falling over Zurich. It was heavy tonight, coating the city in a blanket of silence. My phone, which I had left on the kitchen counter, began to ring. I turned and looked at it. The screen lit up. It was an unknown number. The area code was from Illinois. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I knew who it was. It was Christmas Eve. They were sitting in their small apartment, likely drinking cheap wine, feeling the weight of their new life. They were calling to test the waters. Maybe they wanted to apologize. Maybe they wanted to guilt me. Maybe they just wanted to hear a familiar voice. Or maybe, just maybe, they needed money. It didn't matter. I walked over to the phone. I picked it up. I looked at the number blinking on the screen. I didn't answer. I pressed the button on the side of the phone. Silence. Then, I tapped the screen. Block caller. I set the phone face down on the counter. I walked back to the window and raised my glass to the reflection in the glass. I saw a woman who was whole. I saw a woman who was free. Sometimes, the best Christmas gift isn't wrapped in gold paper. It isn't a watch, or a bag, or a trip to Aspen. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give yourself is the silence where the screaming used to be. Sometimes, the most profound act of love is the distance of 4,000 miles between you and the people who want to drain the life out of you. And this year, for the first time in my life, I had loved myself enough to accept that gift. I took a sip of wine, watching the snow bury the world in white. Merry Christmas, Lavinia. I whispered to the quiet room. You made it. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey of justice, boundaries, and finding self-worth. I would love to hear from you. Please comment down below and tell me which country or city you are listening from right now. It is amazing to connect with people from all over the world. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel Blue Payback, like this video, and smash that hype button so this story can reach even more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong, and see you in the next one.